You ever see Mick before? Really?
Piper.
You saw Piper?
Yeah.
And did he do a reading?
Yes, but very brief.
He did a brief reading. Anyone else come here and see an author do a reading?
Not here.
I mean, to me, it sounds a little funny. You know, tomorrow night we'll be live on Spike and doing some pretty outrageous things, probably. And so it sounds funny when they say, "Hey, come in here. We want you to read." But I mean, that's what they want, so that's what I'm going to give them. So here's the first selection. Sigmund Warburg became a naturalized British subject in April 1939, less than 5 months before the United Kingdom faced the a threat posed by the country of Warburg's birth. His was an ambivalent adoption. Britain adopted him and ultimately honored him, and had always considered him in some measure an outsider, a breaker of the I'm supposed to read from my own book? This piece of crap? All right, I got Ferguson here, though. All right, got that out of the way. Yeah, this is kind of cool for me. This is it's my 9th book, but anytime you start a project like this, it always feels like the first time. And I try to do different readings and tell a few different stories depending on where I happen to be. And so, about 5 minutes ago, I was back in the room picking out selections. You guys will vouch for me, right? Like I didn't come with these ideas, and I was trying to find something like, area specific. And I swear I'm not telling this story just so it looks like I'm bragging about visiting the troops, but this is a story about visiting the troops. It takes place at Walter Reed Hospital, and I'm talking about Ken Anderson. And there's young kids here? Okay. This should be appropriate. Okay. A couple of years ago, Ken and I had the opportunity to tour Walter Reed with then Miss America Jennifer Berry. Jennifer was real cool, couldn't have been nicer, and even let me hold her crown while on a bus ride over to the hospital. The Polaroid camera is a ubiquitous, there's a good SAT word, presence on these hospital visits. A photo is taken in every room visited. One time I arrived for my visit just a day after Al Snow had toured the hospital and spotted many a prestigious Al Snow Polaroid racing the bottom of garbage cans throughout the room. The UK editor actually wanted me to cut that because they thought it was lawsuit material. I know Polaroid went bankrupt a few years ago, but the USO must have stockpiles of film somewhere as the photos were always around. On this day, however, our USO guide was briefly delayed as Ken, Jennifer, and I found ourselves in the room of a wounded soldier, the Polaroid camera in Jennifer's possession. I think I know what she meant to say, something like, "Mick, why don't you take a photo of me with this soldier, and then I will take a photo of this soldier with the two of you." Once again, that's what I think she meant to say. What Miss America actually said was this: "Mick, why don't you do me first, and then I'll do both of you guys at the same time." Ken, the soldier, and I just looked at each other startled, not knowing exactly what to say. This was, after all, a suggestion from Miss America. Fortunately, we opted not to say anything, not even a sophomoric, "Oh, now," or a Hank Kingsley, "Hey, now," opting instead to let Miss America grasp the weight of her own words. "You know," Jennifer said, "I'm not sure that came out the way I wanted it to." All right, and now one thing that I did in this book, after realizing that there are just some readers out there who absolutely, positively do not want anything out of their wrestling books but wrestling, seem upset when I veer off into uncharted territories, while recognizing there are other people out there who do like my takes on different things, and especially I've run across moms and dads who will pick up a book on their coffee table and find it impossible to put down. I'm really proud of the fact that there are two specific reviews done by literary magazines, Publishers Weekly and Book List, that went out of their way to say that the other chapters were one of the publishing weeklies said it was touching and heartfelt, and the book list said the book succeeds on a number of levels, and even those who don't give a hoot about wrestling will enjoy Foley's opinions on a variety of subjects. But knowing that the core base of the audience are the wrestling fans, and not wanting to offend them, I have enclosed with many chapters something that I call the Wrestle Meter, so that if you look through your books, right, some of you have them, right? You're not just showing up with memorabilia. I will tell you this. I will take photos with people who don't buy the book, but I'm probably not going to look that happy. So there are some chapters like Goodbye Vince, which is kind of the name kind of tells that story, which would be a 9 or a 10. And there's another one about having a meeting with a young man named Dr. Paul Wolfowitz, which rates 0 on the scale. It says, go ahead, skip it. This I'm going to read to you from one that merits a 5, in this chapter called Reality Star, and this documents our experience in the world of reality TV, where the A&E camera crews stormed the Foley house for 16 hours a day, 2 crews, 8 hours each, and at the end of that time, we thought we had like a big hit on our hands. It turned out the concern was that there was not enough conflict in the Foley house. But I'm going to read to you a little bit from that chapter. I just wish it would have aired once, just the pilot, if only for the Rocky scenes, if only to see the phone calls from Rocky. Now, first, let me explain that in the world of my little guys, blood is not a noun. It's an action verb. The definition, more or less, to cause bleeding, as in Rocky Balboa leaving a message informing 2 small children that he was going to be stopping by to blood you a little bit. I really just meant it as a joke, a way for my kids to say, come on, Dad, we know it was you. Except they didn't know it was me. I may only do 3 good imitations, but Rocky is one of them. The other 2, Terry Funk and Vince McMahon. The Vince imitation is really good. In case you're wondering, I cannot figure out a way to unscrew this and take a drink of water without looking really foolish. So I'm not going to even try. But I'm going to just dry mouth it. The unintended consequence of my little message is that my children were terrified. Rocky's coming over, Huey said, and he's going to blood us. My wife pulled me aside. Great work, Mick. Your children now think Rocky Balboa is coming over to beat the crap out of them. Well, what do you think I should do, I asked. Have Rocky leave another message, telling them he's only kidding. I walked out the front door and placed the call. Hi, you've reached the Foleys, the machine said. Please leave your name, number, and a short message, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Hello, Huey. Mickey, this is your good friend, Rocky Balboa, and I just want you to know that I would never, ever blood you guys. Hello, Rocky? It was Huey, thinking he was in fact talking to the real Rocky Balboa. Are you going to blood us, he asked? Of course not, little buddy. You know why? Because Rocky Balboa is a friend of yours. When are you coming over? Think up a lie, Mick. Think it up quick. Think of the Grinch and Cindy Lou Who. Huey the Rock is in training right now, so he's kind of busy. Well, what time are you going to be here? Well, your friend Rocky is going to be training for quite a long time, like 2 or 3 months. The questions kept coming. I was running out of things to say, so I just started quoting random lines from the first movie. It's a cold night out there, you know. Even though it was about 75 degrees. Good night for a basketball game. Yeah, so that's a little bit from the world of reality television. And I know some of you guys have been here before, and I can't see everybody because of the The standing arrangements. I just want to know if any of my friends from Rain made it over here. Anyway. Oh, you're back there? How are you feeling?
I'm okay.
And you're the only person representing Rain?
They're on their way.
Should I slow it down?
They took the metro and I drove.
But you know what I'll do? You know what I'll do? Thank you for making it, by the way. I really appreciate that. So, you know what I'm going to do? Why don't we take some questions now, and then we'll allow my friends from Rain to come by here, and so they can hear the little parts of the book that actually there's quite a bit of the book that pertains to them. They can hear a couple of passages. That sound good? Can I do that in a sequence like that? Sometimes stories lead to sometimes questions lead to good stories. Okay, so let's see. And when we ask questions, I like to get a mixture of young and old, male and female, and so. And I just have one. I don't like to threaten people, okay? But I know that when I used to talk to schools, talk to hundreds of kids at a time about the importance of staying in school and treating other people with respect, staying off drugs, reading, I would pour my heart out, and then when it was time to take questions, like say 100 kids raised their hand, and I would say, by the way, did hurt when the Undertaker threw me off the cell. 98 hands. So if you're one of the younger members of the audience and you have a question, like try to make it a good one, okay? All right. And you know how I said that like blood in my kids' vocabulary is an action verb? I don't know quite what the word verse. Have you ever versed? You ever versed John Cena? Have you ever, and I said, well, you know, we're going to try to talk about writing. Have you ever versed Batista? So we're going to try to come up with cool questions if you're a kid and you want to ask questions. And again, the women who are brave enough to attend my signings tend to be shy. And I know what it's like to be called on at a book signing because Madeleine Albright did it to me. And she said, the young man in the red and black flannel shirt. And I got that look that I call the Cindy Brady during the quiz show episode of the Brady Bunch. Just as I was about to, someone else was going to take my question, I blurted out my question. She gave me a long, good answer. So let's see a show of hands. You know, if you got a question, raise it up. Okay, first guy there.
You like amusement parks? How high in your list of the ones that you've been to does Knoebels rate?
Oh, okay. Yeah, Knoebels is how far from here?
About 4 hours.
Oh, yeah, that's worth the trip. Knoebels, what I did, I listed some of them, and there was a chapter. There were 2 chapters that got cut, which I really liked in this book. There was one called A Few of My Favorite Things, which is all about roller coasters and movies and TV shows and my top 10 lists for everything. And the other was called Name Dropping, where I thought if I included a story about famous people I'd met from all walks of life, that it would gain interest from every conceivable media person out there. And then my editor pointed out to me that in the midst of this, you know, roughly 100,000 word book that had, you know, kind of a narrative and it kind of flowed pretty well, that there was just this 30,000 word list of stories that kind of got in the way. So I don't have those, and we've been kind of throwing them in there as free add-ons. It's kind of like what Lil Wayne does with his music. I've been doing with these additional chapters. So when I listed my favorite theme parks, I did it in alphabetical order because it's really important to me to maintain my free admission and line cutting status. And believe it or not, they take these things very seriously, you know, the top roller coasters. But I love Knoebels Grove. On the 9th, I'll be in Daytona, Florida for the Fan Fest before Bound for Glory. But in my heart, I'll be at the Phoenix Fall Fun Fest, which is like one of the best Halloween events. So if you guys can make it out there, it's an incredible event. Yeah, it's a great place. And there's a picture of my kids riding the Twister. You see that? Very cool, right? Good question. Okay.
I saw an interview with you on comicbookresources.com. You've got a comic book coming out. When does that launch?
The comic book comes out November 1st. It's called RPM. It's like my first try at like action adventure and first try this comic book genre, and it's really exciting. Artists did a great job, and so I hope it's yet one more project of mine you'll support, so I can resist getting a real job for as long as possible. Okay, anyone else? Yes.
In the multiple books that you've written, that you've written, has there ever been one part where you kind of looked through the book and you said, "Why did I say that?"
Oh, has there ever been one part where I wish I hadn't said that?
Yeah.
Well, you write it, and then you go over it so many times that theoretically you should reduce those number of incidents. But yeah, there've been quite a few. There've been quite a few times when I look back and think I should have either said something differently or not said it at all. I got in some trouble with my wife for something I put in the book. She looked at it and okay, good. I can talk about you guys now. All right. You got me in a lot of trouble with my wife. I'm going to tell you why. Because right here on the flap cover it says, "Publisher's note." I'll tell you what my author thing says is, Mick Foley is the author of the genre-defining #1 New York Times bestsellers, Have a Nice Day, Foley is Good, as well as 3 children's books and 2 novels. Foley began wrestling professionally in 1985 as a 4-time world champion. He has sponsored children for 18 years with Child Fund International and is a weekly volunteer in RAIN's fight against sexual violence. Mick Foley lives with his wife and 4 children on Long Island. Really pretty nice, right? And then below it says, "Publisher's note, 100% of the advance for this book has been donated to Child Fund International and RAIN." And I forgot to tell my wife about that. I had mentioned the 50. I'll go to the story where I have this sign from God. Thanks for showing. Thanks for being here. I know the drive is bad, and let me just jump back to the 2 readings. We'll go back to the questions, because if you open up your books to the photo section, all right. Well, don't open them yet. Let me do a reading first. All right. Well, then we'll get to it. All right. I'm going to take you back to 1995, when I was getting prepared to wrestle Terry Funk, who was my mentor and father figure, but was like a wild man. I remember after I came home from Japan for like the 5th time in pretty rough condition, my wife asked me if I couldn't have possibly found a different mentor. And I'm going back to where I was about to have my first no-rope barbed wire match of my life, and I was a little trepidatious about it. The conditions were near freezing in the dressing room and not much warmer inside the gym. All the gaijins, that's the name for foreigners, sans funk, huddled around a small kerosene heater just to get warm. Terry was on the other side of the building, leaving me no opportunity to speak with him, to talk over possible ideas for the match. I guess the reasonable goal, looking back on the match all these years later, should have been just to get through it. Be safe and return home in approximately the same condition I'd left in. Unfortunately, my goals tended not to be all that reasonable back then. I wasn't willing to settle for just getting through it. My goal that night was simple and non-negotiable: to have the best no-rope barbed wire match ever. There was only one basic problem. I was terrified. A normal human response to the very abnormal prospect of being dropped head first, neck first, and yes, even balls first, on hungry strands of jagged metal barbs. Now, how exactly does a basically caring, gentle man, me, transform himself into a willing, balls first participant in a match of this barbaric nature? Inspiration. Lots of inspiration. I looked out the dressing room door and saw the Japanese preliminary wrestlers, from this point on respectfully referred to as the Young Boys, taking down the ropes, beginning the process of barbed wiring the ring. I knew I had about 30 minutes before the wiring process was completed. 30 minutes to undergo some type of drastic mental transformation. I took out my battered Sony Walkman and, after great deliberation, selected a cassette, bypassing more. This is back when people listened to cassettes. Completely bypassing CDs. Now who knows what they are anymore. I moved away from the warmth of the crowded heater, finding comfort in the solitude of a far corner of the backstage area, seeing a cloud of my own breath as I pressed the play button. Snow can wait. I forgot my mittens. Wipe my nose, get my new boots on. Like I said, far from conventional, there was just something about that song, that voice, that touched me in a way no other song ever did, or likely ever will. And I read that chapter to you because it was the first one I wrote, and it was inspired on meeting the young lady with the bright orange hair on like the 4th page of the book. Open there, if you would, please. You guys see it? I got that photo like 6 weeks after I had met a singer whose name was Tori Amos. And I loved the photo so much that after 4 years of having a MySpace account, even though my kids had told me for like 2 years that MySpace was dead, I would just occasionally write something out by hand, and then my son would put it in the MySpace blog until I found out he was actually editing what I wrote, and I eventually demanded that he show me how to do it. But I love this photo so much, I wanted it to be my first photo. I had the worst MySpace of all time. There was no photos in it. I wanted this to be the first photo. But inside, I thought, I don't know, that just seemed somehow like a betrayal of trust to just throw a picture that you took up on your website, your account or whatever. And then I thought to myself, but what if she has that same photo on her account? That would make it okay. And before that night, I had never actually been on the computer. I mean, I'd been on it in the sense that my kids would put me on there and say, this is what I want you to look at. But I kind of pieced it together, and I pressed the right buttons, and all of a sudden I went to her website, and there was this little link there to a group called RAIN that she co-founded in 1994 that stands for Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. And I pressed that button, and after doing some reading, I came to feel like that there was really some room for men to talk about an issue that didn't get talked about very often. And so that moment became kind of my inspiration, and I ended up writing that first chapter without even thinking about writing a book. And so it didn't seem exactly crazy to start to think about donating some of that money, although, like I said, I did not inform my wife at the time of the choices I made. And so what I said is, I did a lot of thinking, wondering just what kind of book I'd have written if not for that initial San Diego meeting with Tori Amos, not for that time in a bottle moment that has caused me to put pen to paper 6 months later in that Dublin hotel room. In truth, I wouldn't have even had a thought, let alone a book. And the more I thought about it, the more I became convinced I could climb out just a little farther on the limb of that giving tree, interpreting this feeling to be a sign from God. I walked into the RAIN offices in Washington, D.C., announcing my intention of donating that other half to the invaluable work, education, prevention, crisis intervention they provide in the fight against sexual abuse. Since that day, I've often wondered about that sign from God I thought I'd received. Most likely, it wasn't actually a sign from God. Probably more of a sign that I should have brought my hands up when I saw all those chair shots coming over the years. But even acknowledging that I most likely don't have any real sign interpreting abilities, I still never regretted that decision to donate the rest of the money. In fact, I'm thankful for it every single day. I recently completed a 40-hour training course to become a RAIN online hotline volunteer, learning to help victims on a one-to-one basis. I'm far from a natural. It's only a few hours a week, but I honestly feel like it's as important as anything I've ever done. Up there with winning my first WWE championship, becoming a New York Times best-selling author, and being invited to Christie Canyon's Super Bowl party. She's an actress. If I've learned one thing in life, one truly important thing, it's not to allow anyone else to define what success is. We get to do that for ourselves. And that's one of the things that I will remember when the New York Times bestseller list comes out. It seemed like a very noble statement to make, but probably if you listen closely enough, and I'm not on the list, you will hear a grown man cry. But it really has been a success in a lot of ways for me. It was a lot of fun to write, and I'm out here. We've gotten some great coverage, right? We're trying to help a few people along the way, and I think it's a book that people are enjoying, and I think when you go home, you will be unable to put it down. There's going to be a lot of tired eyes in the D.C. area tomorrow. All right, let's take some more questions. Wait, I wanted a female question, right?
Oh, no.
Let's see. Okay.
But I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
You've managed to stay married for so long over the years, just being on the road and everything like that. So I was wondering what advice you give to newlyweds.
Well, let me go back to the Christie Canyon.
That started off well.
Because this will explain it to you, okay? When I arrived home from the Super Bowl party, I've got this horrible conscience problem, and there was probably no way my wife was going to find out that I'd been at Christie's party, but I would have known. So I told her, I watched the Super Bowl, Christie Canyon, and she said, you have to understand from my perspective, that would kind of bother somebody. I said, it wasn't like a big party. It was like just a few families, and it was at the guy who owns Lucky Brand Jeans house, and my wife said, do you think she can get me a deal? So getting deals for your wife, are you about to embark on
No,
a
I'm
marriage?
recently married, over 2 years.
Recently married? How
yes. August 2nd of 2008. So,
Really?
yes.
Going pretty well?
Yes, very well.
Okay, good. The fact that you're at one of my book signings,
And she knows about it.
she knows about it,
Yes.
but she chose not to join you?
Exactly, I know.
Okay. No, it takes a lot. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of give and take, mostly giving. I have to, have these moments on the microphone like I had with Ric Flair last Thursday, because in 20 years of marriage, I've never won an argument. So get used to not getting your way a lot. Yes, sir. You have a question? Did I see Edge? Like when? Can I tell you another story about my wife? You guys remember? You remember WrestleMania 22? Right? Match ended with Edge putting me through a table that was on fire. Don't try that at home. And it was like my great WrestleMania moment. And I have called home after every single pay-per-view I've ever been involved with one exception, and that was the Hell in a Cell match, 1998. I was kind of out of it. And that was really the match that I needed most to call. And so it was that was the greatest match ever. Oh, I love that match. Like, wasn't that great if your last name was Foley, But in this case, I did remember. I was really proud of the match. I wore white tape on my wrists, and everything from where the tape was down was intact, and all the hair was burned off my forearms all the way up. And so when I called home looking for consolation, you know what she said? Is Edge okay? All right. The women are just not going to ask questions here tonight, are they? Okay, go ahead. Wait, as Rocky Balboa would say, go for it. Yeah. Oh, there's a picture of me with Eunice Kennedy Shriver. You know what? Do you work with them, or what do you work with? Oh, that's awesome. You want to know what my connection is? My dad was the master of ceremonies every single year for the Suffolk County Olympics. Suffolk County is one of 2 counties in Long Island, and later when they combined, the Long Island Special Olympics for like 37 straight years. And so that was like the first time I remember volunteering when I was 14 for Special Olympics. And when we moved back to Long Island in 2000, that was when I really thought I better start really going out of my way to make a difference, because I wasn't with WWE anymore. And I thought, we were always there. The kids were always coming to us from Make-A-Wish and other groups, and then I set about trying to go to where they were. With Eunice, I was there in Shanghai for the World Special Olympic Games, and she was doing just like a meet and greet where hundreds of people came up and had their photo taken with her. And no photo lasted more than a few seconds because it was such a long line. And then when I got up there, she turned to me and said, "And what do you do, young man?" And I said, "Well, Mr. I write some books." She said, "What kind of books do you write?" And she started talking to me. I didn't tell her about the wrestling books. I was told her she's author of children's books. I would like to read them. And, so after a few minutes, Tim came over and he said, "Mom, there's a big line here." So it's such a cool photo, and it reminds me of the other one with Tori Amos because it's not just the one where you put your arm. Not that there's anything wrong with the photos you're going to take with me here, but it was a really cool photo. And a couple nights later, or maybe it was the next night, she was the featured speaker at an event in Shanghai. And I felt I was really worried for her because she was so frail. And she had a tough time getting out there, and she went out without a single note, and, she just made such an impact. And I told Tim a couple of years later, when I saw him at an event, what an impact his mom had made, and I will never forget what she said. She said, when you get involved in a cause, she said, bring your love. This is a terrible Eunice Kennedy Shriver imitation. Sounds a little like Catherine Hepburn. She said, bring your love. Bring your passion, but bring one more thing. Bring your anger. And so I've tried to remember that. And when I go out and try to do something positive, I get really, really angry. No, I bring that little bit of anger. You need that. But thank you. That's a really great question. I've never been asked about that before. Yes, sir.
I'm from Peru, and you have lots of millions of Latinos. Are you planning to translate your book to Spanish? And how's your Spanish? Can you say something in Spanish?
Yeah. Poquito. I've been having the same Spanish conversations with our Hispanic wrestlers for the last 10 years. Como está? Bien. And then I say, oh, gracias, amigo. Just like in Japan, I had the same conversations with Shoji Nakamaki. After we had these horrible matches, we'd come back and he'd say, "You, danger man." I'd say, "No, you, danger man." He'd say, "No, you." So there was definitely a language barrier. But speaking of the Special Olympics, that's really when I understood how big wrestling was in Central and South America, because we walked out I was with a delegation from Saudi Arabia, and like 6 of their 12 people were wrestling fans. But when I walked by like Ecuador and Peru and Argentina, it was like crazy, like being a rock star without rock star groupies. But yeah, I do know that. But I don't think it's going to be translated into Espanol. Okay, let me see. How many more questions? I'm going to let someone over here. Just a couple. You want to be the bad guy or girl? Yep. All right. And you were going to pick the questions. I see someone from Portland.
What do you want me
Did you go there with me?
I sure did.
Good.
Joe Finnegan.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and your sister, right?
Yep.
And she was my year, right?
Yeah, I think so.
You were like a year or two older. Friends with Bill Esterly.
Bill Esterly.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. Bill Esterly taught me a lot because in my first book, I walked into Bill Esterly's room, and he was I think he was a junior, and I was a sophomore, and he was a senior. And Bill was, he was a big rugged guy, and he was sitting on his floor, like Indian style, naked, eating brownies. And I took one look at that, and I was like, I'm never messing with that guy. You don't mess with a naked brownie eater. Well, very cool. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Thanks for representing. All right, you want to pick the last two? Yeah.
I see another woman with her hand up. We'll go there. Well, I became a fan of yours watching you on TV, so
Thank you.
I enjoy you, your personality.
Thanks.
I recall that. But as somebody who's written so many books, I'm trying to do some writing myself. So can you tell me a little bit about your writing process? Because I'm just trying to get into mine, and who's going to read it first, and
Well, this one was unusual because it was not a book I set out to write. Like I said, I had a unique inspiration, and I just sat up and wrote a chapter over the course of 3 days, and then I was like, I think I could write a book. I'm trying to think, when I did the first novel, the writing process for that was that I had an idea, and I just kind of, waited on it. I kind of sat on it. It was like a year, and I waited until like the book almost felt like it was ready to almost write itself, and it was keeping me awake at night, and so I went and got it all out, and I was under the impression when I wrote that book called Tatum Brown that it was this uplifting, optimistic story, and to this date, I'm the only person who's ever seen it that way. But when I wrote it, it was very soothing to me. It was like 3 weeks after 9/11, and that was my getaway to go and work on this thing for several hours a day. But I wish you luck with that. And we have one more. This is a tough one. We got to make sure. There's a lot of pressure on the person who asks the last question. That'll be a great question.
All the way in the back.
I had a question. You're such a great storyteller, especially telling your book story. And I had the privilege of listening to one of your audio tapes as well on road trip. Are you going to do any more of these books and audio book reading yourself?
Am I going to do the audio book reading? I have a bad memory. A friend of mine, he was talking to me about Tatum Brown, that novel I wrote. He was like, yeah, I got the audio tape. Man, it was a good story, but the guy that read it sucked. So that was me. I don't know if I've read another. I did that. I did the first Have a Nice Day, and then I did that novel. And as far as I know, there's not really a lot of interest in having me read it. But I will bring it. There is?
I beg to differ.
Really, there is?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, let me know.
Preferably in your own voice.
Well, I was going to do it kind of a breathy, sexy voice. How do you know that? You really know that people are interested in hearing me read it? Yes. Oh, okay, good. I'm going to have to get a hold of my editor. Something like that. Which one?
For Have a Nice Day.
Really?
And, obviously, I think everybody here is listening to you today. You telling
You guys have found this entertaining? Yeah. All right. Okay, even the mushy parts? Yeah. All right, well, thank you.
Well, if I could, I guess we have one more question right here.
What inspired you to do pro wrestling?
What inspired me to do pro wrestling?
It's not really a positive note to go out on, is it? Let me tell you a story. I'm going to tell you just a quick story about a guy I inspired. Because I had a lot of people come up and say, Have a Nice Day really inspired me. And I'd say, oh, to do what? And they'd say, to wrestle. Man, that's not really what I wanted to hear. And then one guy came up and said, without you, I would have never been an author. I just want to thank you. And I dedicated my first book to you. He gave me a copy. I thanked him sincerely, and I went home that night, and I read one chapter, and it was the most profane, disgusting, horrible stuff that anyone could ever imagine. So I just wanted to point that out. But you know what? I was somebody who liked to get reactions from people, whether it was one person or two people or a whole group of people. As a matter of fact, in the first book I did, I talked about doing this film on 8mm, an 8mm camera, and the high point was supposed to be where I dove off my bed in a Superfly Snuka leap onto a stuffed animal, and I had this red food coloring in my mouth, and when I hit the ground, I spit it out. And because those 8mm cameras have this big bright light, it attracted a lot of attention. And so, like, for the first time ever, girls from my dorm were in my room. And when I hit the ground and the blood, the fake blood shot out, I heard one girl say, "It's the grossest thing I've ever seen in my life." And I remember thinking, I've got to get more of that. So I like to get reactions, and I specifically remember going to Madison Square Garden in October of 1983 and seeing Jimmy Superfly Snuka come off the cage, on top of Don Morocco, and the crowd just went crazy. And that was like a big moment in my life because I remember thinking, like, I need to make people feel the way that I feel right now. So that was maybe my biggest inspiration. And so it's odd now that when I see him, like, I have to try to get away from him as quickly as possible. Have you ever heard? You want to hear? All right, I'm gonna end with one Superfly snooker story for you, okay? And I'm gonna substitute one word for another, and the word I'm leaving out started with an F. Jimmy went to he was at a show for a group called AWA Wrestling, and Greg Gagne approached his dad, Vern, and was concerned, and in his words, the Superfly may have been messed up. Jimmy Snuka overheard that. You know what he said? He said, "You think the Superfly is messed up? You think the Superfly is messed up?" And then he went into a bathroom stall where there was the sounds of hands chopping and loud sounds of inhalation, like. He came out of the bathroom stall and he looked at him and he said, "Now, so I'll leave you with that uplifting story of my hero. All right. Thank you. I think if we have like a little system here, right, we can figure out how to do the pictures and all that stuff.